The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that orbited the neutral world of Kelmer Prime. Inside, representatives from 23 different species sat in their designated seats, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on 2 legs, others on 6, and a few floated in specialized tanks. But today, they all shared one thing in common: they felt safe. Ambassador Throck of the Corvan Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing broadly as he spoke. The Corvans were a proud warrior race, with thick gray skin and eyes that glowed a faint red. Throck's voice boomed through the translation devices that allowed all species to understand each other. "Another year of prosperity," he announced. "Another year of peace. Our alliance has brought stability to the galaxy. We have expanded our trade routes, discovered new worlds, and grown stronger together." Polite sounds of agreement echoed through the chamber. Some species clicked their mandibles, others hummed in harmony, and a few simply nodded their various heads. The Zealoth Consortium's representative, a being that looked like a collection of floating crystals, pulsed with satisfied light. The Vakesh Theocracy's high priest bowed his elongated head in acknowledgement. In the back of the chamber, Junior Officer Kalara of the Corvan military watched the proceedings with barely concealed boredom. She had been assigned to security detail for this gathering, which meant standing still for hours while politicians congratulated themselves. At only 30 cycles old, she was one of the youngest officers in the fleet, and ceremonies like this reminded her why she preferred being on a starship. Her datapad buzzed softly. Kilara glanced down at it, expecting another routine status report. Instead, her eyes widened. The sensor logs from the outer rim stations showed something strange. Gravitational anomalies. Big ones. The kind that appeared when massive objects moved through space, bending reality around them. She looked up at Admiral Vex, her commanding officer, who stood near the front of the chamber. The old warrior had fought in more battles than Kellara had seen sunrises. His scarred face told the story of a lifetime spent in combat. Surely he would want to know about this. Kellara moved quietly through the chamber's edge, trying not to disturb the ceremony. She reached Admiral Vex and held out her datapad. "Sir," she whispered, "the outer rim sensors are detecting unusual readings." Vex glanced at the datapad, his expression unchanging. "Unusual how?" "Gravitational distortions. Large scale. Multiple locations along the border of charted space." The Admiral's eyes flickered with something that might have been annoyance. He handed the datapad back to her. "Space is full of gravitational anomalies, Junior Officer. Black holes, neutron stars, dark matter concentrations. This is nothing to concern the Council with." "But sir, the pattern is random cosmic noise." Vex's voice carried a tone of finality. "The humans are gone, Kalara. They'd been gone for 50 years. They were never as strong as they pretended to be. When we united against them, they ran like cowards. They're probably extinct by now, hiding in some forgotten corner of the universe, or more likely, dead from their own primitive technology." Kalara wanted to argue, but she knew better than to challenge a superior officer in public. She stepped back to her position, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had studied the old war records as part of her training. The humans hadn't seemed like cowards to her. Desperate, maybe. Outnumbered, certainly. But they had fought with a creativity and ferocity that had surprised everyone. Ambassador Throck continued his speech. 50 years ago, we faced a threat to our way of life. The humans expanded too quickly, adapted too easily, and claimed too much. They refused to accept their place in the galactic order. So we did what was necessary. We united, we drove them out. And we have prospered in their absence. A few species shifted uncomfortably. Not everyone had supported the war against humanity. The Zealoth had argued for diplomacy. The Narish Collective had abstained from the vote entirely. But the Corvans had been convincing. They had shown projections of human expansion, warned of human ambition, and painted a picture of a species that would eventually dominate everyone if left unchecked. In truth, the war had been brief. Human colonies across the galaxy had been attacked simultaneously in a coordinated strike that involved hundreds of fleets. The aliens had expected fierce resistance, desperate last stands, and brutal final battles. Instead, they found something far more unsettling: evacuation. Every human colony, station, and outpost had been abandoned. Not in panic, but in careful, methodical order. The aliens had arrived to find empty cities with lights still on, ships that had departed just hours before, and databases that had been completely wiped. It was as if humanity had known the attack was coming and had simply chosen to leave rather than fight. For weeks, the Allied fleets had searched for the human home fleet, expecting a massive counterattack. It never came. Humanity had vanished into deep space beyond the edge of known territory, and had not been heard from since. At first, the Council had been nervous. They posted guards on the former human worlds, kept their fleets on high alert, and scanned constantly for any sign of return. But years passed, then decades, and nothing happened. Gradually, the fear faded. The aliens moved into the former human territories, divided the resources among themselves, and tried to forget that humanity had ever existed. The Corvans had claimed the former human capital world, turning it into a military headquarters. The Zeleth had taken the trade stations. The Vakesh had claimed several of the more habitable planets for their expanding population. It seemed like a fair division of the spoils. Ambassador Throck wrapped up his speech with a flourish. Let us celebrate another year of unity. Another year without the human threat. Another year of... A soft alarm began to sound. It was quiet at first, just a gentle pulsing that most species couldn't even hear. But Kalara heard it. It was the priority signal, the one reserved for fleet-wide emergencies. Admiral Vex touched his ear, activating his communication implant. His expression changed instantly from relaxed confidence to something Kalara had never seen on his face before. Fear. The Admiral moved quickly to the podium, pushing past Ambassador Throck. Forgive the interruption, he said, his voice tight. But I've just received word from our outer rim stations. All of them have gone dark, simultaneously. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Species spoke over each other in a dozen different languages, creating a chaos of sound that the translation devices struggled to handle. Dark how? Demanded the Zeleth representative, their crystals flashing with alarm. No response to any communication. Sensor contact lost. And before they went silent, several stations reported the same thing. Vex paused, and in that moment of silence, Kalara felt the weight of history shifting. They reported massive fleet signatures. Thousands of ships, all moving toward the inner systems. The Vakesh High Priest stood, his robes flowing around his thin frame. What species commands such a fleet? Who dares attack the Council? Admiral Vex looked at Kalara, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he spoke it. The signatures don't match any known species, he said slowly. But the configuration, the formation patterns, they match old records? Very old records. He took a breath. The humans are coming back. For a moment, the chamber was absolutely silent. Then it exploded into panic. The Vakesh science vessel Enlightened Path drifted through the void near the border of what had once been human space. Its crew of 12 scientists and support staff had volunteered for this mission, driven by curiosity rather than military orders. While the Council argued and debated in their chambers, the Vakesh wanted answers. Brother Kelman stood at the sensor station, his long fingers dancing across the holographic controls. As a member of the Vakesh theocracy, he had devoted his life to understanding the universe's mysteries. The disappearance of the Outer Rim stations was exactly the kind of mystery that fascinated him. Anything? Asked Sister Thera, the mission commander. She floated nearby, her robes held in place by the ship's artificial gravity. Nothing yet. But the gravitational readings are definitely unusual. They're too regular to be natural phenomena. Kelman adjusted the sensors, pushing them to maximum range. There, I've got something. On the main screen, a small object appeared. It was roughly spherical, about the size of a cargo container, and it was broadcasting a weak energy signature. Is it a probe? Thera moved closer to the screen. Possibly. But I'm not detecting any power source. It's just drifting. Kelman ran a quick analysis. Wait, it is powered, but the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. Should we retrieve it? Thera considered. Council protocol said they should report any findings immediately and wait for military support. But the Council was in chaos right now, and by the time they sent a fleet, this object might have drifted beyond their reach. Besides, it appeared inactive. What harm could there be? Bring it aboard, she decided. But keep it in the isolated examination bay. Full containment protocols. The crew used the ship's tractor beam to carefully pull the object into the cargo hold. Once it was secure, Kelman and 3 other scientists suited up and entered the examination bay. Through the thick glass windows, the rest of the crew watched nervously. The object was smooth, almost perfectly spherical, with a surface that seemed to shift colors in the light. One moment it appeared silver, the next a deep blue, then a color that shouldn't exist but somehow did. Strange symbols covered its surface, and they seemed to move when not directly observed. The symbols are human, Kelman said, running his scanner over the surface. But they're not any human language in our records. This is something new. One of the other scientists, a younger Vakesh named Torin, reached out carefully with a scanning tool. The moment it touched the sphere's surface, the object activated. The symbols began glowing with a soft white light, and a hum filled the chamber. Back away! Kelman ordered, but it was already too late. A hologram appeared above the sphere. It showed a human woman, though she looked different from the humans in their historical records. Her eyes had a slight glow to them, and there was something about her features that seemed sharper, more defined. When she spoke, her words came out in perfect Vakesh, as if the probe had analyzed their language in seconds. Greetings to whoever finds this message. You are curious about what happened to humanity. That is good. Curiosity is a virtue. Let me show you what we became. The hologram shifted, showing images that made the scientists gasp. Vast shipyards in deep space, structures that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Ships being built that dwarfed anything the Council races had ever constructed. Cities inside asteroids, colonies on neutron stars, habitats in the photosphere of suns themselves. 50 years ago, you drove us from our homes. You united against us because you feared our expansion, our adaptability, our potential. You thought you were preventing a threat. In truth, you created one. The images changed again. Now they showed technology that shouldn't be possible. Ships that folded space around themselves without using traditional faster-than-light drives. Weapons that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Shields that could turn energy attacks into harmless light. We spent 50 years doing what humans do best, adapting. We found new stars in the darkness between galaxies. We discovered technologies left behind by races that died before your species even evolved. We improved ourselves, our ships, our society, and we prepared. Kelman felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just a species that had survived. This was a species that had evolved beyond anything the Council could imagine. By the time you see this message, our fleet will already be in motion. We are coming home, not as refugees, not as supplicants asking for permission to exist. We are coming home as a force that cannot be denied or dismissed. You took 50 years of peace from us. We spent that time becoming something you cannot fight. The hologram showed one final image, a fleet so massive that it blocked out the stars behind it. Ships of every size and configuration, moving in perfect formation, their hulls made of materials that seemed to drink in light itself. This is not a threat. This is simply information. You wanted to know where humanity went. Now, we went away, and we came back stronger. The woman in the hologram smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not a kind one either. See you soon. The hologram vanished. The sphere's lights dimmed, and then it began to count down in clear, unmistakable numbers. It's a self-destruct, Torin shouted. Everyone out, now! Kelman grabbed the youngest scientist and ran for the door. The crew scrambled through the reinforced exit as the countdown reached 3, 2. 1. The explosion was contained by the examination bay's shields, but barely. The enlightened path shook violently, alarms blaring throughout the ship. When the smoke cleared, the bay was empty. The probe had vaporized itself. Leaving no trace of the advanced technology it had contained, Sister Thera pulled herself up from where she had been thrown. "Did we get a recording?" "Yes," Kelman said, checking his datapad with shaking hands. "Every word. Every image. We need to get this back to the Council immediately." "Agreed. Set course for Calmer Prime maximum speed." But as the enlightened path turned toward the heart of Council space, its long-range sensors picked up something that made the entire crew fall silent. All across the border regions, similar probes were appearing, hundreds of them. And on the other side of those probes, the sensors detected what could only be described as an impossible sight. Ships, thousands upon thousands of ships. All of them human. All of them moving with perfect coordination toward the systems that had once belonged to humanity. The leading edge of the fleet was still days away, but it was coming with the certainty of a rising sun. The Veka's ship raced toward the Council. But even as it traveled, more reports came in. Mining stations in the outer systems had gone silent. Automated defense platforms stopped responding to commands. Long-range communication relays were being systematically disabled. It was all being done with such precision that it could only mean one thing. The humans had been watching, mapping, and planning for a very long time. By the time the enlightened path reached Kelmer Prime 3 days later, the entire galaxy knew. The humans were returning, and they were bringing with them technology and power that made the Council's greatest achievements look like children's toys. Emergency sessions were called. Fleets were mobilized. Planets began fortifying their defenses. But underneath all the activity, there was a growing sense of dread. 50 years ago, the Council had fought against a humanity that was young, scattered, and relatively primitive. Now they faced something that had spent half a century preparing for this exact moment. In the Council chambers, Brother Kelman played the recording from the probe. The assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as the human woman explained what her species had become. When it finished, the chamber erupted in desperate voices, all asking the same question in different ways. "What do we do?" Admiral Vex stood and called for silence. "We fight," he declared. "We united once to drive them away. We can do it again." But in the back of the chamber, Junior Officer Kalara looked at the images of the human fleet and felt certain of one thing. This time would be very different. This time, humanity was not running away. The former human capital world of Terra Nova hung in space like a jewel, its blue oceans and green continents visible from orbit. 50 years ago, it had been home to 2 billion humans. Now it served as the headquarters of the Corvan military, with gray fortresses replacing the elegant cities that once stood on its surface. Admiral Vex stood in the orbital command station, looking down at the planet with a mixture of pride and unease. This station was the pride of the Corvan fleet, armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Around it, 300 warships maintained defensive positions. It was the most heavily defended system in Council space, apart from the Council seat itself. "Sir, we're detecting faster-than-light signatures," reported the sensor officer, a young Corvan named Drevik. "Multiple contacts. Very large signatures. How many?" Vex asked calmly, though his heart was racing. "Counting now, sir. 10, 20, 50. Sir, they're still appearing." "The signatures are—" Drevik's voice trailed off in disbelief. "Admiral, I'm reading over 3,000 distinct contacts. All of them larger than our biggest dreadnoughts." The command center fell silent. 3,000 ships. The entire Corvan fleet numbered barely 5,000 vessels, and most of those were scattered across 100 systems. Here, at Terra Nova, they had 300 of their best warships. It suddenly seemed like a very small number. "Battle stations," Vex ordered. "All ships to defensive formation. Raise shields. Charge all weapons." Across the fleet, Corvan warriors rushed to their positions. Gun crews loaded plasma cannons. Fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits. Shield generators hummed to life, creating shimmering barriers of energy around each ship. They were ready to fight, ready to die if necessary. The Corvans had never run from a battle, and they would not start now. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. They appeared all at once, their arrival so perfectly synchronized that it seemed like they had been created from nothing. The ships were like nothing Vex had ever seen. They were sleek where Corvan ships were brutal, elegant where council vessels were functional. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and they moved through space with an almost organic grace. At the center of the formation was a ship that made Vex's blood run cold. It was enormous, easily 10 kilometers long, with a shape that reminded him of Earth's ancient ocean predators. Its hull was darker than space itself, and along its surface, lights pulsed in patterns that hurt to look at too long. Then the message came. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every council language, and in languages that had been dead for thousands of years. The voice was calm, professional, and carried an authority that could not be denied. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Human Fleet. 50 years ago, you drove us from our homes. You attacked our colonies without warning. You destroyed the lives of billions of innocent people. You did this because you feared what we might become. There was a pause. Today we show you what you created. On every view screen across the fleet, an image appeared. It showed a human woman in a uniform that seemed to be made of light itself. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, her expression neither angry nor forgiving. She looked like someone who had seen too much, fought too hard, and won too many battles to be impressed by anything the Council could throw at her. You now occupy our worlds. You live in our cities. You profit from our resources. This ends now. You have 24 hours to evacuate every human world you have claimed. Every station. Every outpost. Every colony. 24 hours. After that, anyone who remains will be considered a hostile occupier and will be dealt with accordingly. Vex felt rage building in his chest. How dare these humans issue demands? They were outnumbered here, and across the galaxy, the Council could muster hundreds of thousands of ships. Yes, the human vessels looked advanced, but surely they couldn't stand against the combined might of 23 species. This is Admiral Vex of the Corvan Empire, he broadcast back. You have no authority here. These worlds were taken in a legitimate military action. If you want them back, you will have to fight for them. And I promise you, we will not run as easily as you did. There was a long silence. Then Admiral Qian's voice returned, and this time there was something in it that made Vex's skin crawl. It was not anger. It was pity. Admiral, I've read your file. You're a veteran of 200 engagements. You've won glory for your people. You're brave, competent, and loyal. I respect that. So, I'm going to give you information that might save your life and the lives of your crews. Another pause. You cannot win this fight. You cannot even slow us down. In approximately 30 seconds, we will demonstrate why. I suggest you watch carefully. Vex opened his mouth to order an attack, but before he could speak, one of the human ships moved. It was a smaller vessel, perhaps only a kilometer long, and it simply drifted forward from the main formation. As it moved, its hull seemed to shimmer and become transparent. Not invisible transparent. Through it, Vex could see the stars beyond. The ship passed through the outer defensive line. The Corvan vessels fired everything they had at it. Plasma bolts, missiles, energy beams, even experimental weapons that could crack a planet's crust. All of it passed straight through the human ship as if it wasn't there. The transparent vessel continued forward, passing through 3 more defensive lines without slowing down. It drifted right through the command station itself, and Vex watched in horror as it passed through the walls, through the equipment, through the very air he was breathing. He could feel it, a strange tingling sensation, but it didn't hurt him. It simply moved through his physical space as if he existed in a different dimension. The ship emerged on the other side of the station, solidified back into normal space, and rejoined the fleet. The entire demonstration had taken less than 2 minutes. That was one ship using one capability, Admiral Chun said. We have 3,000 ships here, and each one has capabilities your science cannot explain and your weapons cannot counter. We spent 50 years learning from races that existed before your ancestors crawled out of their primordial oceans. We have become something that transcends the conventional rules of space and time. Across the Corvan fleet, officers looked at each other with growing fear. If the humans could phase through matter itself, what good were shields? What good were armor plating and defensive stations? How could you fight an enemy that could move through your ship and only become solid when they chose to? You still have 24 hours, Chun continued. I recommend you use them wisely. We have no desire to kill anyone today. We simply want our homes back. But make no mistake, we will take them back, whether you choose to leave peacefully or not. Admiral Vex looked around his command center. He saw the fear in his officer's eyes, and he felt it in his own chest. He had faced death before, had stared down enemies that outnumbered him, had fought battles that seemed impossible to win. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was a lesson in humility. He thought about ordering an attack anyway. Corvan honor demanded that they never surrender without a fight. But what would that accomplish? His ships couldn't hit an enemy that could become intangible. His weapons were useless. His warriors, brave as they were, would die for nothing. Vex touched his communication panel. All ships, he said slowly, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Stand down. Begin evacuation procedures. We're leaving. There were shocked gasps from some of his officers. A few looked like they wanted to argue, but most simply nodded, relief visible on their faces. They were warriors, yes, but they were not fools. As the Corvan fleet began its withdrawal, similar scenes played out across dozens of systems. Zealoth trade stations were visited by human ships that demonstrated weapons capable of manipulating gravity itself, crushing defensive platforms into tiny spheres of compressed matter. Vakish colonies watched as human vessels created temporary wormholes, allowing troops to appear anywhere on a planet's surface instantly. Each demonstration was carefully calculated to show overwhelming superiority without causing casualties. The message was clear. Resistance was not just futile, it was pointless. Humanity had evolved beyond conventional warfare. Junior Officer Kalara watched from her position on one of the evacuation ships. She saw Terra Nova growing smaller behind them, saw the human fleet taking positions around their former capital. And she understood with perfect clarity that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans had not just returned. They had returned as something greater. Something that made the rest of the galaxy's species look like primitive children playing with stones. In the distance, the massive human dreadnought moved into orbit around Terra Nova. On its hull, light spelled out a message in the old human language of English: "Welcome home." The Corvan War Council met in the depths of their homeworld, in a chamber carved from solid stone thousands of years ago. Around a circular table sat the 12 highest-ranking military commanders of the Corvan Empire. At the head of the table was Supreme Commander Grath, a massive warrior whose body bore scars from 100 battles. He had led the Corvan forces against humanity 50 years ago, and he had been certain then that the humans would never return. He had been wrong. "We have received reports from every occupied human world," Grath said, his voice heavy with barely controlled rage. "The humans have reclaimed 93 systems in the past week. They did so without firing a single lethal shot. Our forces withdrew without engaging in any meaningful combat. This is unacceptable." Admiral Vex sat at the table, still shaken from his encounter at Terra Nova. "Supreme Commander, with respect, combat was impossible. Their technology is beyond anything we can counter. Our weapons are useless against ships that can phase through matter. Our shields cannot stop weapons that manipulate spacetime itself. So we surrender?" Grath slammed his fist on the table. "We, who have conquered 50 worlds? We, who have never known defeat in open warfare? We simply give up because the enemy has fancy new toys?" "They are not toys," Vex said quietly. are proof that while we spent 50 years celebrating our victory, the humans spent 50 years evolving beyond us. Another commander, General Fax, leaned forward. What about the other council races? The Zeleth? The Vakesh? Surely if we all united again. The other races are already negotiating with the humans, interrupted Admiral Kallara, who had been promoted rapidly after her early warnings about the human return. The Zeleth have offered full reparations and a trade agreement. The Vakesh are seeking cultural exchange programs. The Narish Collective has already recognized human sovereignty over all former human territories. We are alone in our resistance. Then we fight alone. Grath stood, his full height towering over the table. I will not be remembered as the supreme commander who surrendered to the species we once defeated. Gather the entire Corvan fleet, every ship from every system. We will show these humans that we are not afraid. Vex wanted to argue, but he could see it was pointless. Corvan pride would not allow retreat, even in the face of certain defeat. Perhaps a decisive loss would be better than this slow humiliation. At least then they could say they had fought with honor. 3 days later, the Corvan Grand Fleet assembled at the edge of the Corvan home system. It was the largest military force the Empire had ever gathered. 10,000 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to small fighters. Every ship was crewed by warriors eager to prove that the Corvans were not defeated, merely surprised by unexpected technology. Supreme Commander Grath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unyielding Pride, and looked at the tactical display showing his assembled fleet. It was magnificent. Surely no force in the galaxy could stand against this much firepower. Send a message to the human fleet, Grath ordered. Tell them that the Corvan Empire rejects their demands. Tell them that if they want our surrender, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. The message was sent. For an hour there was no response. Then the sensors detected something that made even Grath's confidence waver. A human fleet was approaching, not just a few ships. Thousands of them. The two fleets faced each other across the darkness of space. The Corvan formation was traditional and proven, a strong center with mobile flanks, support ships in the rear, fighters screening the larger vessels. The human formation was different. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed almost like a dance, constantly shifting position in ways that made no tactical sense. All ships, Grath broadcast to his fleet, weapons free. Attack pattern Delta? Show them the strength of the Corvan Empire. The Corvan fleet surged forward, 10,000 ships moving as one toward the human line. Weapons charged, missiles launched, and space filled with deadly energy. It was a sight that should have terrified any enemy. The humans didn't even try to dodge. The first wave of Corvan fire reached the human ships and stopped. It simply stopped in midair, frozen in space as if time itself had been paused. Thousands of plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams hung, motionless in the void, creating a deadly wall of stopped time between the two fleets. Then, with a gesture that seemed almost casual, the human ships released the captured weapons. But instead of continuing toward their targets, the weapons reversed course. Every plasma bolt, every missile, every energy beam turned around and flew back toward the Corvan fleet. Grath watched in horror as his own weapons struck his own ships. Shields flickered and failed. Hulls were breached. Ships that had been attacking moments ago were now crippled by their own firepower. And the human fleet still hadn't fired a single shot. "Evasive maneuvers!" Grath shouted. "Spread out!" Pattern Omega. The fleet tried to scatter, but then the human ships did something that defied all understanding. They moved. But they didn't move through space in the normal way. They simply appeared. One moment a human ship would be kilometers away. The next it would be directly beside a Corvan vessel, having crossed the distance without traveling through the space between. These close-range human ships deployed something that looked like glowing nets of energy. The nets wrapped around Corvan vessels and simply shut them down. Engines stopped. Weapons went offline. Life support continued, but everything else became dead weight. Ship after ship was disabled in this way, and there was nothing the Corvans could do to stop it. "Return fire," Grath ordered desperately. "All weapons maximum power." The Corvan fleet tried to fight back, but it was like trying to punch a ghost. Human ships phased out of reality when attacked, becoming transparent and intangible. Weapons fire passed harmlessly through them. When the Corvans tried to ram the human vessels with their own ships, they simply passed through the enemy like water through fog. Meanwhile, the human ships continued their methodical work. They moved through the Corvan formation with perfect coordination, disabling vessels with efficiency that was almost surgical. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. The humans were showing the Corvans exactly how outmatched they were, from her position on a destroyer. Kellara watched as the pride of the Corvan fleet was systematically taken apart. She saw the great dreadnought Eternal Victory disabled by a human ship 1/10 its size. She saw fighter wings scattered by weapons that created localized gravity wells, pulling the small ships off course without destroying them. She saw the Supreme Commander's flagship, the Unyielding Pride, surrounded by 5 human vessels that somehow froze it in place, unable to move or fire. The entire battle lasted 3 hours. At the end of it, the Corvan Grand Fleet was completely disabled. Not a single ship had been destroyed, not a single Corvan had been killed. But every vessel was dead in space, crews unharmed but helpless, waiting to see what the humans would do next. A hologram appeared on every Corvan ship simultaneously. It was Admiral Sarah Chun, and she looked tired. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally weary, as if this victory brought her no joy. "Warriors of the Corvan Empire," she said, "you fought bravely. You showed courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Your ancestors would be proud of your spirit. But spirit alone cannot win battles when the technological gap is this wide." She paused, letting her words sink in. 50 years ago, your Supreme Commander led the attack on our worlds. He believed we were a threat that needed to be eliminated. He was wrong. We were not a threat then. We were simply a young species trying to find our place in the galaxy. But his actions forced us to become something more. The image shifted, showing what appeared to be human scientists working with technology that seemed to blend biology and machinery. We didn't spend these 50 years planning revenge. We spent them trying to understand the universe at a deeper level. We merged our consciousness with artificial intelligence, giving us processing power that approaches the divine. We studied the ruins of the precursors, learning secrets that have been dead for 1 billion years. We pushed the boundaries of physics until they broke and showed us what lay beyond. Admiral Chun reappeared. We could have done this 50 years ago if we had chosen the path of warfare. We could have become the monsters you feared. We could have turned our creativity and adaptability toward destruction instead of creation. But we didn't want to be conquerors. We wanted to be explorers, scientists, artists, philosophers. Your attack forced us to become warriors, but we refused to become what you assumed we would be. Supreme Commander Graf, still on the bridge of his frozen flagship, felt something he had never experienced before: shame. The humans were right. The Corvans had attacked not because humanity had done something wrong, but because they might do something wrong in the future. They had created their own enemy through fear and prejudice. Your ships will be released in 24 hours, Chun continued. You will return to your homeworld. You will tell your people what happened here. And you will understand that the age of might makes right is over. We're taking back our worlds, yes. But we're not doing to you what you did to us. We're not driving you from your homes. We're not forcing you into exile. We're simply reclaiming what was always ours. 2 weeks after the battle that wasn't really a battle, the Galactic Council met again. But the chamber looked very different now. A new seat had been added at the head of the table, larger than all the others, made of a material that seemed to shift between metal and crystal. And sitting in that seat was Admiral Sarah Chun. The representatives of the 23 Council species sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting to hear what humanity's terms would be. Some, like the Zealoth and the Narration, seemed relatively calm. They had not participated heavily in the original attack on humanity, and they had been quick to offer apologies and reparations. Others, particularly the Corvans and their close allies, looked like they expected harsh punishment. Chun stood and the room fell into absolute silence. She was not wearing a military uniform today. Instead, she wore simple civilian clothes, as if to remind everyone that she was not here as a conqueror, but as a representative of her people. 50 years ago, you made a decision, she began. You looked at humanity and saw a threat. You saw how quickly we expanded, how easily we adapted to different environments, how we seemed to thrive everywhere we went. And you were afraid. That fear led you to unite against us in a way you had never united before. She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each representative. Fear is understandable. Fear is natural. But fear that leads to violence against innocent people is something else. It's cowardice dressed up as pragmatism. It's genocide justified by what-ifs and maybes. The Corvin ambassador, a younger warrior named Krell who had replaced the disgraced Thrak, looked like he wanted to argue but remained silent. However, Chun continued, we are not here to punish you for past actions. Punishment is what children receive when they misbehave. You are not children. You are civilizations that have existed for thousands, some of you millions of years. You made a choice based on incomplete information and fear. It was wrong, but we understand why it happened. She returned to her seat and sat down, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. Here are humanity's terms. First, all species that participated in the attack on human colonies will pay reparations. Not in money or resources, which we don't need. You will pay in knowledge. Your best scientists will share their research freely with human scientists. Your best teachers will help educate the next generation of humans. Your best engineers will assist in rebuilding what was destroyed. The Zealoth representative, their crystals pulsing with interest, asked, that is all. You ask only for knowledge? Knowledge is the most valuable currency in the universe, Chun replied. We didn't spend 50 years advancing our technology just to demand tribute from defeated enemies. We advanced it so that we would never have to fear anyone again. And so that we could help others advance as well? The Vakish high priest spoke next, his voice tentative. And the second term? The Galactic Council will be reformed. Humanity will hold a permanent seat with veto power over any military action proposed by the Council. We will not allow fear-based aggression to happen again to any species. If you want to go to war, you will need to convince us that the war is justified. This caused some murmuring. Several species looked uncomfortable with the idea of humanity having such power. But what choice did they have? The humans had demonstrated technological superiority so complete that resistance was meaningless. Third, Chun continued, any species that wishes it may apply for human protection and partnership. We are offering defensive pacts, technology sharing agreements, and cultural exchange programs. This is voluntary. If you prefer to maintain your independence, that is your right. But the option is there for those who want it. Ambassador Krell stood, his posture stiff with wounded pride. You speak of partnership, but what you describe sounds like vassalage. You would make us dependent on you. Chin looked at him with an expression that was not quite sympathy but was close to it. Ambassador, I understand your concern. But consider this, 50 years ago, your ancestors attacked us because they feared we would dominate the galaxy. They saw our potential and decided to strike first. In response, we left. We could have fought back. We had the numbers, the courage, and the desperation to make it bloody for everyone. But we chose not to. She stood again, her voice growing stronger. We spent 50 years becoming powerful enough that no one could ever force us to leave our homes again. We could have come back as conquerors. We could have turned every species that attacked us into slaves or simply wiped them out. Would that have been unjust? By your own standards of might makes right, we would have been within our rights. The chamber was silent. Everyone knew she was right. But we didn't do that, Chun said softly, because that's what you would have done. That's what made us leave in the first place. We didn't spend 50 years becoming stronger just to become you. We became something better. And now we're going to help you become better too, whether you like it or not. She sat back down. Those are our terms. They are non-negotiable. You have 1 week to accept them. Any species that refuses will not be attacked or harmed, but they will be isolated. No trade with human worlds, no access to human technology, no protection from human forces. You will be free to continue as you are, but you will do so alone. The council members looked at each other. The terms were surprisingly generous, given what humanity could have demanded. But they were also clear about one thing: the galaxy had changed. Humanity was now the dominant force, and they were going to use that dominance to reshape galactic civilization according to their values. Over the next few days, every species accepted the terms. Even the Corvins, though it clearly pained them to do so. They had no choice. The alternative was isolation from the most technologically advanced civilization in the galaxy. 3 months later, Junior Officer Kalara, now Captain Kalara after her rapid promotion, found herself on Terra Nova. She had been assigned as a military liaison between the Corvan Empire and the new human government. It was a position of honor, or at least that's what her superiors told her. She suspected it was more of a punishment for being right. When everyone else was wrong, she walked through the streets of Terra Nova's capital city, watching as human colonists returned to their homes. The Corvan fortresses were being dismantled, replaced by buildings that seemed to grow organically from the ground itself. Human children played in parks that had been military training grounds just months before. It was peaceful, ordinary, and somehow that made it more impressive than all the advanced technology she had witnessed. A voice called out to her. "Captain Kalara?" She turned to see Admiral Chun walking toward her. The Admiral was not surrounded by guards or attendants. She was simply walking alone, enjoying the evening air. "Admiral," Kalara said, snapping to attention. "Please relax," Chun said with a smile. "We're not at war. No need for formality." Kalara relaxed slightly. "I wanted to thank you, Admiral, for what you said to the Council about fear and choices." Chun nodded. "You understand, then, why we did things this way?" "I think so. You could have destroyed us, but that would have made you the monsters we feared you would become. Instead, you chose to prove us wrong by being better than we expected." "Exactly." Chun gestured at the city around them. 50 years ago, your people attacked us because they thought we would inevitably become a threat. They made that decision based on fear and assumptions. We could have come back driven by revenge and anger. We could have justified anything we did as payback for what was done to us. But revenge is a poison that destroys the one who drinks it. They walked together in silence for a moment. Then Kalara asked the question that had been bothering her since the fleet's return. "Admiral, what you showed us, the technology, the power, was any of it bluffing? Could you really have destroyed all of us if you wanted to?" Chun stopped walking and looked at her. Her eyes were sad. "Captain, what we showed you was the minimum necessary to make our point. The truth is, we could have done far worse. We have weapons we didn't deploy because we never want to use them. Technologies that we keep locked away because they're too dangerous to exist in a galaxy that solves problems through violence." She resumed walking. "That's why we're imposing this new order. Not because we enjoy having power over others, but because someone has to prevent the kind of fear-based thinking that led to our exile. Someone has to say that there are better ways to solve problems than attacking what you don't understand." Kalara considered this. "And if someone challenges your authority? If a species develops technology that rivals yours and decides they don't want to follow your rules?" Chun smiled. "Then we'll welcome them as equals and hope they're wiser than we were. The goal isn't to rule forever, Captain. The goal is to create a galaxy where rule by force is no longer necessary, where species can develop and grow without fear of being attacked for their success, where curiosity and creativity are celebrated, not punished." They reached a plaza where a memorial was being constructed. It listed the names of every human who had died during the evacuation 50 years ago. Not many, considering the scale of the exodus, but every name represented a life cut short by fear and violence. "We remember," Chun said, looking at the memorial. "We remember why we left and what it cost us. And we remember that we have the power to make sure it never happens again."